So my very first episode that I did was on going from one kid to two kids. And I thought the other day that I have a bit of a clearer perspective on that now. So I wanted to talk about what I learned going from one to two, now that we are nearly 7 months into the thick of it. So I listened back to that first episode, which was a bit difficult and cringe. I feel like I've come a long way just from that, from a podcast perspective. So that's cool. I actually went and got some editing software because I was trying to do it on my voice memo app and that was just a nightmare. So yeah, I think I've evolved a bit. But yeah, I like that episode, but I think I just did it too early. Those were interesting thoughts at 6 weeks postpartum, but this is how things have changed for us and what I've learned 6 months later. So hi, I'm Rachel and this is 10,000 Steps with Baby. Thanks for listening. I'm a mum of two, a little boy called James who's 3.5 and a little girl called Alba who's now 7 months. So things that are the same, mum guilt. I think in some ways this has gotten worse. When I was doing the first episode, Alba was about 8 weeks old when I recorded it, and bless her, she was still just a sack of potatoes that needed to eat every 45 minutes. So if she was warm, fed, had a clean nappy, she didn't really need any more. Sometimes she wanted held. Often she was just happy to lie on the floor listening and watching the chaos. So although I felt guilty for the times James had to wait a few minutes while she was feeding, he still really had the majority of my attention. He has on a few occasions been really upset that she is there at all. So we had a meltdown in the car park in the library one day because he was insisting that I leave Alba in the library and just us to go home. And a few times he's insisted that Alba just be immediately put down so I can be 100% playing a game or whatever it is we were doing. And he's done this with Jack and grandparents too. But at the very start, yes, I felt guilty for not being with whoever I wasn't with at the time. But I think it's gotten worse because now it's 7 months, Alba is crawling, she needs constant supervision, or she's trying to climb onto the TV stand or whatever she can find. She needs attention at meal times because she's eating too, and she needs playing with and interacting. So now my time is definitely more 50-50 between the two of them when I'm on my own. And I think that's become harder on James because I just can't be as present. They talk about sort of the quality of time and the quantity of time that you spend with your child. And before, I would be able to lay Alba on the floor and me and James would have a solid 30 minutes of playing with his cars or whatever while Alba watched us before she needed some intervention. But now I'll say, okay, let's play cars. And then I have to go grab Alba from the TV stand or stop her from eating a puzzle piece she's found. Or she's not allowed to play with the cars, so she starts crying. I need to pick her up. And I think James finds that frustrating, which is very understandable. And then equally, there can be long periods where if James is having a meltdown about something, or I do try to give him my undivided attention, then I'll suddenly remember that no one has paid any attention to Alba for an hour. And yeah, you can't give them both all that you want to all the time. I think Alba has never known different, or maybe it's her personality, but she seems to handle it a bit better. Or maybe she's just not as noisy when she's not handling it compared to James, so we don't notice it as much. And I do try to have them both involved in things at the same time. So get Alba to play with the cars when we are, but it doesn't always work, particularly as sharing is obviously quite a difficult thing for a 3-year-old. And to see a toy that is precious to you not even being played with, but just being chewed on and covered in saliva is hard. So yeah, the guilt that I spoke about in the first episode definitely continues. I've said this before, but no matter how equally or fairly I've tried to split my time, I never go to bed thinking, oh, I got that right. Yeah, and the other guilt that comes is me being shorter with James. So I'm running on less sleep, I have more demands on my time, I'm getting pulled in more directions. Sometimes Alba is crying and I'm trying to cook dinner at the same time, and James is telling me the same thing over and over and over again. And in my sensory overload, I've snapped at him a few times, which I then feel terrible about. Or I've put some expectation or requirement on him just because I've been carrying 18 things and had Alba in the sling, and I've been insisting he put on his own shoes, which he can do, but mostly he wants me to do. And it's turned into this big argument or this big standoff about the shoes, and it's because I'm overwhelmed, and it would just help me a lot if he could put on his shoes. But he's 3 and he doesn't understand that. He doesn't have the situational awareness or the cognitive thinking to understand, oh right, okay, mum's got lots of things to carry and Alba's crying and you just need to get the shoes on quickly. And he obviously doesn't, his brain doesn't process like that yet, but I forget that when I'm overwhelmed. So yeah, I'm not as patient with him. I've snapped at him a few times, and then yeah, I feel guilty about that, but yeah, I go to bed and I think afterwards, oh, well, why did I snap at him for not putting his shoes on? Or when he wanted to show me his blue ball 14 times. But yeah, there you are. I'm definitely not winning any perfect mother awards, but who is? So mum guilt. Yeah, a lot of fun. The other thing I found is that, and lots of people assured me, by the way, that going from 1 to 2 isn't twice as hard, which I would say is probably true, but there are some things that there is twice as much of, and that's just general work, other work. So there's twice as much laundry somehow, there's twice as many toys, twice as much tidying up, twice as many dishes now that Alba started weaning, twice as many doctor's appointments or events or things to do, twice as much stuff to take with you when you leave the house or if you're going anywhere. I'm actually thinking of getting a laminated checklist for the front door, because even 7 months in, I don't think we've ever left the house without forgetting something. And sometimes it's something important. Like the other day we arrived at a petting zoo farm to find that no one had put James's shoes on or packed them. We went swimming and I had to beg a spare nappy off another mum, just a random lady that I found in the changing rooms, because I hadn't put any new ones in my bag. I think part of it is that James had not long been at the age where we didn't need to take spare clothes and wipes and dummies, so we'd slightly fallen out of the habit of it when Alba was born. But yeah, I'll let you know if I get a checklist. That's maybe a step too far. I think people would judge me if they saw that in my house. The other thing that has doubled is the time it takes to do anything, particularly leaving the house. I do remember when Alba was about 4 weeks old, we decided to go to a soft play and then have some lunch somewhere, and it took us legitimately 2 hours to leave the house. Now I think we're a lot better, but it still takes us probably at least 45 minutes. You get Alba fed and in her suit and into the pram, and then James decides he wants to wear his wellies instead of his trainers, and then he needs a wee, and then he wants to bring his scooter, and then Alba does a poo, and you have to take her out, and then James has found a toy under a chair while we changed Alba, so now he doesn't want to go to the park, he wants to play with his toy. And by the time you're out the door, I'm dripping in sweat usually, and I feel like I've lived 3 lifetimes. But the positive is we've halved our time in 6 months, so maybe in another 6 months we'll get out the house in half an hour, which I think is a very reasonable time if you have young kids. Okay, something else, third thing. I remember when I was day 4 postpartum with Alba, sobbing on Jack's shoulder, saying, I'm worried we've ruined James's life. So a lot of that, I think, could just be the wild ride of postpartum hormones, and I can't really remember why I thought it was such a big deal or how exactly it was going to ruin everything for him. But I do remember worrying a lot while I was pregnant about how everything was going to change for James. And even last night, me and Jack talked about it, because as I was taking James up to bed, he said, I want to go in my bed. And Alba is now in his bed. And he's lost his room, he's lost his bed, lost his high chair, lost his pram. And I hadn't really thought about any of this, because as an adult, you don't think this stuff is important particularly. And we thought he might be happy because he's in mummy and daddy's bed and one of us is with him, and he doesn't need his high chair anymore. And he never did anything in his bedroom apart from sleep. But yeah, he's all those things have now become Alba's. And James, to be fair to him, has put up without a peep, everything changing, which must be really hard when you're 3 years old. And I catch myself quite often the way I talk to her compared to him. And it's because she's a baby, so it makes sense, but she's eating her broccoli, making a huge mess, and I'm going, oh, clever girl, eating your broccoli. And then I look over at James and I'm like, come on, James, eat your broccoli. And I have memories of childhood of my younger sister getting away with things and saying to my parents, oh, it's not fair, you've not told Katie off, or she doesn't get into trouble. And them saying, well, you're older, you know better. Which I think is one of those universal things parents say. But yeah, I think this is probably just an extension of the guilt. But in a way, I do feel sad that his life has had to change so much. And of course, I tell myself that, well, he has to learn that life is like this, which he does. But I guess as a parent, you don't want your children to ever learn there are hard or difficult bits to life. If I could, I would have it that he always got everything he wanted and he was the centre of attention for everybody and never experienced any hardship, even though I know it's not possible and not a good way to be raised. He would turn out to be like the worst possible adult ever. Every parent just wants their kid to be as happy as possible is what I'm trying to say, but it definitely hasn't ruined his life so far. I guess we'll find out when he's 30. But he's been very adaptable. I thought it would be a lot harder than it has been. Like I said, there's been a few Alba-related meltdowns, but really he's done so well and taken it all in his stride. So I didn't need to worry about that as much as I did. We tried to do a few things to help which maybe might just be creating problems in the future, but who knows. So we tell Alba off in front of James. So obviously he gets told off about 1 million times a day because he's 3. So to try and balance it out, we tell Alba off as well. Like, for example, if they're in the bath together and she's kicking her legs about and she catches James with her leg, I'll say, oh, Alba, don't kick James, you're not allowed to hurt him. And I'll move her away to the other end of the bath. And of course, she doesn't have a clue what's going on, but James loves it. Or if she pulls over a box of bricks and they go all over the floor, I'll be like, oh, Alba, you're so naughty. And James will come running over and he's like, what did Alba do? And I'll say, oh, she's made a big mess knocking all these blocks over. And he'll be like, oh, Alba, you shouldn't make a mess. Now you have to tidy them all up. So he loves telling her off too. And sometimes we'll tell Alba, oh, she's not allowed to do something. So, no, you can't go on James's bike. That's his bike, not yours. Or, no, that's James's ice cream. You can't have an ice cream. And at the moment, when she doesn't have that much awareness, we're getting away with that. And I think it helps James to feel like he's not always the one being told, get out of Alba's pram or get out of this. So, yeah, we might be creating monsters, but it seems like it works a little bit at the moment. So So the positives, because I promise it isn't all bad, it just feels like that sometimes. So I have found it to be even more true, what I said in the first episode about confidence. It's nice to be able to parent without having to Google everything or worry about everything. Part of that is your prior experience. You know what weird things are normal and all the little tips and tricks like folding back the back of the nappy edge over to stop blowouts going all the way up their back. Thank you to the mum who taught me that, by the way. So you don't have to learn everything for the first time, but you also just don't have the time or the ability to be trying to do things like wake windows. Alba just has to sleep around school drop-offs and pickups and all the other things going on. Or sterilising. I sterilised James's dummies and tried to keep his toys clean for the first 6 months, and I have not sterilised one single thing of Alba's ever. It's just completely pointless, because when I turn away for 2 seconds, James has given her his dirty shoe to chew on. So yeah, and she's absolutely fine. It's not made a jot of difference. And things like weaning with James, I looked up baby recipe ideas and would prep his food, and I was buying things like expensive wild caught Alaskan salmon for him to have as one of his first foods, and poor Alba just gets chucked a little bit of whatever we're eating, but she's also absolutely fine with that. So yeah, it's nice to have that confidence and taking the pressure off that you have as a first time mum, that you have to do things in a certain way. Yeah, it's just a lot more relaxed. The other really nice bit is you get to remember all the things from your first. I didn't write anything down with James because I thought at the time, oh, I'll never forget that. But it's only when Alba does the same thing I suddenly remember, oh yeah, James would always put his hand in my mouth when he was feeding, or yeah, he stroked my arm when he was tired. So I did forget all of those things, so it brings a lot of those memories back, and it's a cliche, but it's very true that it does go so fast. So it's nice being able to do it all again and savour it a bit more, because you know it ends really quickly. So like that limp little body thing when they fall asleep on your chest, and when they let you give them like hundreds of kisses without complaining about it. So I do that to James now. He's like, "Mom, get off me." Yeah. And the last thing is that they are mostly really good around each other. I'm sure that won't be the case in 6 more months, but currently James is Alba's absolute favourite person. She just wants to be with him all the time, thinks he's the funniest, coolest person ever. Even when he's snatching toys off of her or shouting at her, she just laughs and tries to get closer to him. And James is mostly very kind, very sweet with her, and has been since the start. And I've been told by friends with slightly older children that at some point I'll be able to sit on the sofa with a coffee for 5 minutes while they play together before you have to jump in and break up a fight. So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, it's crazy. Hats off to those who have more than 2, or to any mums or dads out there doing it on their own. I can't even imagine how hard that must be, keeping it all together for everyone. A friend asked me recently about what I'd say about having another baby, and I think the summary is that it's really hard. There's so many lovely bits, but it's really hard. But the thing that trumps everything else is you have another baby. So all the hard bits don't really matter because they exist. So everything's all right. And if anyone out there listening is expecting their second or thinking about having another baby, then that is my answer to that question. So thank you so much for listening. If you don't already, I would love it if you would go and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're using. Oh, and please go and follow 10,000 Steps with Baby on Instagram too. It would help me a lot. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week.